At 52, he finally got what he'd been waiting for his whole life. 6 months later, it was gone. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was going home and telling his wife. Julian Ashford sat in his car in the driveway of the house he'd lived in for 23 years, engine off, hands still on the wheel. The lights were on inside. Sandra was home, probably making dinner, probably wondering why he'd been sitting out here for the past 20 minutes. He couldn't make himself go inside. The news had broken 2 hours ago. His phone had been ringing ever since. He turned it off somewhere around exit 12 on the Mercer Parkway. The silence was worse than the calls. Ashford Capital loses $58 million on failed tech acquisition. Julian Ashford's first major solo investment implodes. After 3 decades of waiting, heir apparent stumbles at the finish line. 52 years old, 30 years at his father's firm, a lifetime of preparation, of waiting, of proving himself over and over again. And in 6 months, he'd managed to destroy it all. The front door opened. Sandra stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from inside. Even from here, he could see the question on her face. Julian got out of the car. "I saw the news," she said. He nodded, couldn't quite meet her eyes. "How bad?" "Bad." She stepped aside, let him in. The house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary, normal, safe, everything his life wasn't anymore. They stood in the foyer. 30 years of marriage, and he had no idea what to say to her. "I need a drink," he said finally. "I'll get it." She walked to the kitchen. He followed. This house, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, professionally landscaped yard in Westchester, had been their compromise. She'd wanted something smaller, cozier. He'd needed something that looked right for a future CEO. Now it just felt like a museum, beautiful, empty. Sandra poured him 3 fingers of scotch, poured herself the same. "Tell me," she said. So he did. Here's what you need to understand about Julian Ashford. He'd been the heir apparent since he was 22 years old. 30 years of being groomed, tested, evaluated. 30 years of being almost there. 30 years of his father saying soon and never meaning it. And then 6 months ago, everything changed. 6 months earlier, Victor Ashford called a family meeting. Not at the office, at the house. The family house in Greenwich, the one where Julian and his sister Camille had grown up. The one their mother still lived in, rattling around in 12,000 square feet of carefully maintained emptiness. Julian arrived first. Camille came in 15 minutes later. She'd flown in from London, where she'd been running the European division for 8 years. They nodded at each other, didn't hug. They weren't that kind of siblings. Their father was already in his study. 78 years old and still working 70-hour weeks, still closing deals, still building his empire brick by brick. Eleanor Ashford, their mother, brought coffee, set it down without a word. She'd perfected the art of being present without being noticed. 43 years of marriage to Victor Ashford had taught her that. "I've made a decision about succession," Victor said. Julian felt his spine go rigid. This was it, finally. "I'm giving you both a test." Victor's voice was flat, clinical, like he was discussing market conditions, not his children's futures. "You'll each receive $50 million in discretionary capital, 12 months to deploy it however you see fit. Best risk-adjusted returns, get the CEO position." The room went silent. "You're making us compete," Camille's voice was carefully controlled, "for our own family's company. I'm giving you an objective measure. This removes emotion from the equation." "It adds emotion to the equation," Julian heard himself say. "You're pitting your children against each other." Victor's gaze shifted to him, cold, evaluating. "You've both been waiting for this. Now you have a clear path. I'm doing you a favor." Julian wanted to argue, wanted to stand up, walk out, refuse to participate in this grotesque game. But he'd been waiting 30 years. What was one more? "When do we start?" he asked. Victor smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You already have." Julian's strategy was simple. Find a company positioned for explosive growth, take a significant position, ride it to a strong return. Not flashy, not reckless, solid. He found quantum logistics through a contact in his father's network, a man named Robert Huang who specialized in tech sector deals. The company was developing AI-driven supply chain optimization. The pitch was compelling. 3 major shipping contracts about to close, revenue projected to triple in 18 months, management team with Fortune 500 experience. Julian's team started due diligence. 2 weeks in, they were asking for more time. "There are some questions about the contract timelines," his associate said. "We need another month to verify." "We don't have another month," Julian cut him off. "Camille's already deployed 30 million. We're behind." "But sir, if we miss something?" "We won't. These contracts came through Dad's network. They're vetted." The associate nodded, didn't push back. Julian was the boss. That should have been his first warning. He committed $47 million over 3 weeks, moved fast, moved decisively. His father had always said fortune favors the bold. His father had also said a lot of things that turned out to be traps. The first crack appeared 10 weeks later. One of the 3 shipping contracts fell through, not canceled, just delayed pending further review. Corporate speak for dead. Julian wasn't worried. 1 contract out of 3. The investment thesis still held. 2 weeks after that, the second contract collapsed, then the third. That's when Julian started digging. What he found made his blood run cold. The contracts had never been real. They'd been letters of intent, deliberately misrepresented as signed agreements. The revenue projections were fiction. The management team's credentials were inflated. The entire company was a house of cards built on sophisticated lies. Someone had created this specifically to look real under a rushed review. Someone had created this to destroy whoever invested. Julian tried to exit his position. Too late. The stock was already cratering. By the time he liquidated everything he could, the 50 million was down to 9. $41 million, gone. The financial press had a field day. His father said nothing. That was worse than anything they wrote. If you're watching from the US, UK, South Africa, anywhere really, drop your location in the comments. I need to know who's here for this story because what happens next is where everything changes. "I'm sorry," Julian said to Sandra. They were in the kitchen. She was on her second scotch. He was on his third. "For what?" "For failing, for embarrassing you. He gestured vaguely at everything. The house, the life, the careful construction of success that was collapsing around them. Sandra set down her glass. Her hand was shaking slightly. "How long have we been married, Julian?" 30 years. 30 years. And in 30 years, do you know how many real conversations we've had? The kind where we actually say what we're thinking instead of performing for each other. He didn't answer. He knew the number. It was lower than either of them wanted to admit. "I'm not upset that you lost money," Sandra said. "I'm upset that you still think that's what matters, that you came home and apologized for embarrassing me instead of asking if I was okay, if we were okay. Are we okay?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. "I haven't known for about 10 years, but you've been so focused on waiting for your father to die or retire or acknowledge you or whatever the hell you've been waiting for that you never noticed." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Sandra." "I'm tired, Julian. I'm so tired." She stood up. "I'm going to bed. You should. I don't know. Figure out what you're going to do next." She walked out. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, the bedroom door closing. He sat alone in the kitchen and tried to remember when they'd stopped being happy. He couldn't. It had been so gradual, like a shoreline eroding one grain of sand at a time, until one day you look up and realize you're standing on a cliff. His phone buzzed. He turned it back on out of habit. The message was from his daughter. "Mia saw the news. You okay?" He stared at the text. When was the last time they'd talked? Really talked, not just the obligatory phone calls on birthdays and holidays. Mia was 26, living in Portland, working at a nonprofit he didn't entirely understand. She'd gone to a state school instead of an Ivy, majored in something impractical, chosen a life that made no sense to him. She was happy. He was pretty sure she was happy. They didn't talk enough for him to know for certain. He typed, "I'm fine, just a setback." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Mia, Dad, you don't have to perform for me. Are you actually okay?" He stared at the message. His daughter who he barely knew, who had chosen a life completely foreign to him, was checking on him. Actually checking on him, not checking on the investment or the company or the legacy. He didn't know how to answer. He set down the phone without responding. The next morning, Julian went to the office. He didn't know what else to do. His assistant, Beth, looked up when he walked in. 22 years she'd worked for him. Her face was carefully neutral. "Mr. Ashford, I didn't expect you today. Is my father in?" "He's in meetings all morning." Of course he was. Julian went to his own office, closed the door, sat behind his desk and stared at the wall. His computer chimed. Email from Camille. Subject, "I'm sorry." "Julian, I heard about Quantum. I'm so sorry. I know how much this meant to you. If you need anything, let me know." "I see." He read it 3 times, looking for the hidden knife, the subtle gloat, the competitive edge. It wasn't there. She actually sounded sorry. He didn't know what to do with that. He pulled up his investment records, started going through the Quantum logistics deal piece by piece, trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong. The answer was everywhere. The due diligence had been rushed, the verification incomplete. He trusted the wrong people, moved too fast, believed his father's network was infallible. But there was something else, something that nagged at him. The deal had come through Robert Huang. Huang had said it was perfect for Julian's timeline, his investment thesis, his need to move quickly. How had Huang known Julian was under pressure? How had he known the specifics of Julian's situation? Julian opened his contact list, called Huang's office. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ashford," the receptionist said. "Mr. Huang is no longer with the firm." "As of when?" "2 weeks ago." "Do you have a forwarding number?" "I'm afraid not." Julian hung up, stared at his computer screen. 2 weeks ago, right after the Quantum collapse, right after Julian's very public failure. That wasn't a coincidence. He started digging deeper. Who was Robert Huang? Where had he come from? Why had he brought this specific deal to Julian? 4 hours later, he had his answer. Robert Huang had been hired 6 months ago. His only client at the firm had been Julian. His only deal had been Quantum logistics. Someone had placed Huang specifically to feed Julian this poisoned investment. The question was who and why. Julian went home that evening to find Sandra in the garden. She was pulling weeds with methodical precision, her hands deep in the dirt. "I need to tell you something," he said. She didn't look up. "Okay." "I think someone sabotaged me, deliberately. The Quantum deal wasn't just a mistake, it was a setup." Now she looked up. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat and something that might have been tears. "Does it matter?" she asked. "What?" "Does it matter who sabotaged you? Will knowing change anything?" It changes everything, if someone deliberately. Julian, she stood up, brushed off her hands. You've been sabotaging yourself for 30 years. You've put your father's approval ahead of everything, ahead of me, ahead of Mia, ahead of your own happiness. So yes, maybe someone pushed you into a bad deal. But you were already standing on the edge. That's not fair. Isn't it? Her voice was sharp. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you called your daughter without it being a birthday or holiday? When was the last time you chose us over your father? He didn't have an answer. Sandra shook her head, picked up her gardening gloves. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. I need space to think. She walked past him into the house. He stood alone in the garden as the sun set, and tried to remember when everything had gotten so broken. Julian couldn't stay in that house, couldn't sit in that office, couldn't face his father or his team or anyone who knew him as the heir who'd finally gotten his shot and blown it. He needed to disappear. He found it in the family's property records. A small apartment building in Queens, 6 units, nothing special. It had belonged to his grandfather before Ashford Capital existed. The family still owned it, managed by a property company, mostly forgotten. Julian called the manager. Is there a vacant unit? 13B, it's small, are you sure? I'll take it. He didn't tell Sandra where he was going. Left her a note saying he needed time, threw some clothes in a bag, drove to Queens. The building was exactly what he expected, old, worn, unremarkable. The kind of place his grandfather would have bought in 1961 for $12,000 and then forgotten about once he started making real money. Julian carried his bag up 3 flights of stairs. The hallway light was out. He fumbled with his keys in the dark. You're the new tenant. Julian turned. A man was standing at the end of the hall holding a flashlight. 50s, black, gray threading through his hair. Work clothes, khakis, flannel, boots that had seen years. I'm the super Marcus Cole. He walked closer. Lights out, bulbs on order. Buildings old, things take time. Julian, he hesitated. Julian Ashford. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Recognition, distaste. It was gone too quickly to read. Well, Julian Ashford, welcome to 3B. You need anything fixed, you let me know. He turned to leave, then paused. You look like you could use some sleep. It's been a long week. Most weeks are. Marcus walked away, his footsteps echoing in the dark hallway. Julian let himself into 3B. The apartment smelled like old paint and previous lives. 1 bedroom, kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, bathroom with tiles that hadn't been updated since 1985. It was perfect. No one would think to look for Julian Ashford here. The first few days were a blur. Julian bought groceries from the corner bodega, made bad coffee, slept badly. His phone buzzed constantly, his mother, his assistant, people from the office pretending to care. He let the battery die. On the 4th day he saw Marcus again. The super was fixing a leaking pipe in the basement. Julian watched him work. There was something calming about Marcus's movements, methodical, unhurried, competent. Hand me that wrench, Marcus said without looking up. Julian found it in the toolbox, passed it over. You settling in? Marcus asked. As much as possible. What brings you to Queens? You don't seem like the type. What type do I seem like? Marcus glanced at him, the type who's running from something. Julian didn't answer. Marcus went back to the pipe. They worked in silence for a while. Julian didn't know why he was there. He should have been upstairs making calls, trying to salvage what was left of his career. Instead, he was in a basement in Queens watching a superintendent fix a pipe. You got family? Marcus asked. Wife, daughter. They know where you are. More or less. Marcus grunted. More or less usually means less. It's complicated. It usually is. Marcus tightened something, tested the pipe, nodded with satisfaction. You know what I learned? Complicated usually just means we're lying to ourselves about what's actually simple. And what's actually simple? Either you want to be with them or you don't. Either you're willing to do the work or you're not. Marcus stood up, knees cracking. Everything else is just noise. He walked away before Julian could respond. Over the next few weeks, Julian fell into a routine. Coffee from the bodega, long walks through neighborhoods he'd never noticed, conversations with Marcus that were never long but always seemed to matter. He called Sandra once. The conversation was stiff, careful. They talked about logistics, bills, insurance, the mortgage, not about anything that mattered. He called Mia twice. The first call went to voicemail. The second time she answered. Dad. Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to check in. A pause. Are you okay? And don't say fine. I can hear it in your voice. Something's wrong. I'm in Queens, living in grandfather's old building. You're what? I needed space to think, about work, about everything. Another pause, longer this time. Is Mom okay? Mia asked. I think so, we're just taking some time. Dad, her voice was soft. Are you guys separating? I don't know, maybe. I don't know what we're doing. I'm sorry. Don't be, this isn't your fault. I know it's not my fault. I'm still sorry. He heard her take a breath. You know what's weird? I've been waiting my whole life for you to stop being who you thought you had to be. I never thought it would happen like this. What do you mean? You've always been so perfect, so put together, so much Victor Ashford's son that there wasn't room for anything else, including being my dad. Her voice cracked. I don't want you to be miserable, but maybe miserable is the first step to being real. Julian didn't know what to say to that. They talked for another few minutes, carefully, tentatively, like two people learning a language they'd never quite mastered. When they hung up, Julian sat on his bed and cried for the first time in 20 years. Now pay attention, because this is where the story really starts, where you find out what's actually been happening this whole time. Julian was helping Marcus move furniture out of 2A. Mrs. Chen was moving to a nursing home. Her daughter was handling the logistics, when he noticed the bookshelf in Marcus's apartment. The door was open, the books were visible. The Intelligent Investor, Principles of Corporate Finance, Competitive Strategy, The Innovator's Dilemma. Julian froze. You read business books, he said. Marcus followed his gaze, his expression shifted. Used to. These aren't casual reading. No. Julian set down the box he was holding, walked to Marcus's doorway. Who are you? For a long moment, Marcus didn't answer. He set down the lamp he'd been carrying and looked at Julian the way you look at someone when you're deciding whether to trust them. My name is Marcus Cole, he said finally. 10 years ago, I founded a company called Cole Logistics. We specialized in algorithmic optimization for supply chains. We were small but growing, about to break through. Julian's stomach dropped. He knew what was coming. We got attention, venture capital, and eventually an acquisition offer. Marcus's voice was flat, empty, from a firm called Ashford Capital. The world tilted. They promised to scale us, go national, then global. My team would stay on, my vision would be preserved. Marcus smiled without warmth. 6 months after the deal closed, they dismantled everything, laid off my entire team, sold the technology in pieces to 3 different companies. I walked away with a fraction of what they'd promised, and a non-compete that kept me out of the industry for 5 years. Marcus. My wife left during the lawsuit. My savings went to lawyers. By the time I could work again, the industry had moved on. I was 50 years old with no company, no savings, no marriage. He picked up the lamp again, So I found other work, ended up here. Julian felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. Why didn't you throw me out? Why are you helping me? Marcus set the lamp down on a table, adjusted it carefully, took his time. Because you're not him, he said quietly. Not yet, but I can see it in you, the hunger, the certainty, the belief that winning is the only thing that matters. I was like that once before your father taught me otherwise. So this is revenge, turning his son against him. If I wanted revenge, I'd have gotten it years ago. I know things about your father that would destroy him. Marcus met Julian's eyes. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in whether you're going to become what he is or something else. Julian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. I need to know something, he said. My failure, the quantum deal, did you know about it? I read the news like everyone else. But did you know I'd end up here? Did my father? He stopped. The pieces were clicking together in his mind. Did my father send me here? Marcus's silence was an answer. How long have you known who I was? Julian asked. Since the day you said your last name. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? Your father destroyed my life 10 years ago, and now here you are, his son, broken and looking for answers. Marcus shook his head. I almost did throw you out, that first night. I stood in my apartment and thought about all the things I could say. All the anger I could unload. Why didn't you? Because you looked. Marcus paused, searching for the word. Lost. You looked exactly like your father did back when I knew him. Before the money and the empire and all of it. Just a man who'd built his whole identity on one thing and didn't know who he was without it. Julian sat down on the couch. His legs didn't feel steady. I couldn't save your father, Marcus said. He didn't want to be saved, but maybe I could save you, or maybe, he stopped. Maybe what? Maybe helping you was also helping me. Maybe I needed to prove that what your father did to me didn't break me, that I could still build something, even if it was just helping one person figure out their life. Julian looked at this man his family had destroyed, who had every reason to hate him, who had chosen to help him anyway. I don't know what to say, Julian admitted. You don't have to say anything, just decide what you're going to do next. Julian started investigating, not with his assistant or his team, alone in the middle of the night, cross-referencing documents and emails and records. Robert Huang, the man who'd brought him the quantum deal, had been hired specifically to work with Julian. He'd appeared 6 months ago, disappeared right after the collapse. But who had hired him? Julian pulled employment records. Huang had been recommended by Victor Ashford's office, personally. His father had placed the man who destroyed him. But there was more. Julian found the original due diligence report on quantum logistics, dated 4 months before his investment, commissioned by Ashford Capital's research team. It flagged everything: the fraudulent contracts, the inflated projections, the management team's fabricated credentials. 4 months before Julian invested, his father's team had identified quantum as a fraud. The report had been buried, hidden in a subfolder marked not actionable, never forwarded to Julian's team. And then the deal had been fed to Julian anyway, through Huang, with gentle pressure to move fast. His father had known, had set him up, had watched him walk into the trap without saying a word. The question was why. Julian went to his mother. Eleanor Ashford still lived in the Greenwich house. 43 years in the same house, the same marriage, the same carefully constructed life. She opened the door herself. Her face cycled through surprise, concern, something harder to name. Julian, we've been worried. You disappeared. I know I needed time. He stepped inside. The house smelled like lemon polish and old money. I need to ask you about Dad. She led him to the sitting room, poured tea neither of them would drink. Her hands were shaking. "Did you know about the quantum report?" Julian asked. Eleanor set down the teapot. Tea spilled onto the saucer. "Julian, there was a due diligence report. 4 months before I invested, it flagged everything. Someone buried it." He leaned forward. "Did you know?" His mother was 70 years old. She'd survived 4 decades of marriage to Victor Ashford by being strategic, careful, invisible when necessary. She'd never looked this fragile. "I found out after," she said quietly. "After your deal collapsed. I was looking for something else in your father's files and I found the original report. And you said nothing." "I didn't know what to do." Her voice broke. "I've spent 43 years looking away from your father's choices, telling myself they weren't my business, or I wouldn't understand, or I couldn't change anything anyway. But this was different. This was you. Why would he do it? Why would he sabotage his own son?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. I asked him. He said—" She stopped, composed herself. "He said he was saving you, that you'd understand someday." "Saving me from what?" "From becoming him, I think, from making the same mistakes." She finally met his eyes. "Your father isn't a happy man, Julian. He's successful, powerful, respected, and he's miserable. He has been for as long as I've known him, maybe longer. You've been married to him for 43 years. I've been married to his ambition for 43 years. I stopped being married to the man about 30 years ago." Her voice was hollow. "He wasn't always like this. When we met, he was different. Hungry, yes, but also warm, present. He wanted to build something, not just win things." "What changed?" "Success changed him. Or maybe success just revealed what was already there. The more he won, the more he needed to win. And everything else, marriage, children, relationships, became obstacles or tools, never just life." Julian thought about Sandra, about Mia, about all the years he'd spent choosing the company over them. "I'm just like him," he said quietly. "No," Eleanor's voice was sharp. "You're not yet. You still have time to choose something different." "I don't know how." "Neither do I. But your father did you a favor, even if it was a cruel one. He showed you what your life would become if you kept going the way you were going. What you do with that is up to you. If you've been through something like this, watching someone you love choose ambition over everything else, or being that person yourself, this next part is for you. Because this is where Julian has to decide what kind of man he's going to be." Julian went back to Queens, sat on the roof of the building, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His phone rang. Camille. He almost didn't answer, but something made him. "Hey," he said. "Julian, finally. I've been calling for weeks." "I know, I'm sorry." A pause. "Are you okay? And don't say fine, I can hear it in your voice." "I found out Dad sabotaged me, deliberately. He buried a report that would have saved me from quantum. He wanted me to fail." Silence on the other end of the line. "Camille." "I know," she said quietly. "You know. I figured it out about a month ago. I was looking into my own investments, trying to make sure I wasn't walking into the same trap, and I found the report. At first I thought it was a mistake, then I realized it wasn't. And you didn't tell me." "I didn't know if I should. Part of me thought maybe you deserved it." Julian absorbed that. It hurt less than he expected. "But then I kept thinking about it," Camille continued, "about why Dad would do this, and I realized he did the same thing to me." "What?" "Not the same way, not with a sabotage deal, but the whole competition, the whole test, it was designed for me to lose, or to win and realize winning didn't matter. I don't know which." "I don't understand." "Julian, do you know why I moved to London 8 years ago? To run the European division." "No, because I couldn't stand being here. Couldn't stand competing with you, living up to Dad's expectations, pretending I wanted to run this company." Her voice cracked. "I've spent 8 years in London doing a job I hate, managing an office I don't care about, because I was too afraid to admit I didn't want any of this." "Then why are you still doing it?" "The same reason you are. Because it's what we were raised for. Because walking away feels impossible. Because we don't know who we are if we're not Victor Ashford's children." Julian closed his eyes. "What do we do?" "I don't know, but I know I'm tired. I'm so tired of trying to win a game I don't even want to play." They talked for another hour. Really talked, maybe for the first time in their adult lives. About their father, their mother, the ways they'd been shaped and damaged by a family that measured love in achievements. When they hung up, Julian felt something shift. He wasn't alone in this. He'd never been alone. He'd just been too focused on competing to notice. Julian went to see his father. Victor Ashford's office looked the same, immaculate, intimidating, designed to make visitors feel small. But Julian didn't feel small. He felt clear. "You sabotaged me," he said. No preamble, no politeness. "You buried the quantum report. You knew the company was fraudulent and you fed me the deal anyway." Victor set down his pen, gave Julian his full attention. "Yes." No denial, no excuses, just yes. "Why?" "Because you needed to fail." Julian had expected deflection, manipulation, some elaborate justification. He hadn't expected honesty. "The competition with Camille was theater," Victor continued. "You were always going to win. You're more like me, more hungry, more ruthless. She would have conceded eventually, but winning wouldn't have saved you." "Saved me from what?" "From becoming me." Victor's voice was quiet, tired. "I'm 78 years old, Julian. I've built an empire. I've won every game I ever played, and I'm the most miserable person I know." Julian stared at his father. He'd never heard him talk like this. Never heard him admit to anything resembling weakness. "I destroyed Marcus Cole's company 10 years ago," Victor said. "He was brilliant, passionate, building something real, and I saw an opportunity to acquire his technology cheaply, so I did. I promised to preserve his vision. I lied. I gutted his company, destroyed his life, and walked away with a profit." "I know," he told me. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. "You've talked to Marcus." "I've been living in grandfather's building, where Marcus works, where you knew I'd end up." Victor nodded slowly. "I hoped you would. I couldn't guarantee it, but I hoped." "How long have you been planning this?" 7 years, maybe longer, since the day I realized you were going to end up exactly like me unless something changed." Victor stood, walked to the window. "You're 52 years old. You've spent 30 years waiting for me to hand you this company. And every year you waited, you became more like me, more empty, more certain that success was the only thing that mattered. You could have just talked to me." "I tried." Victor's voice was sharp. "I tried when you were 25. I tried when you were 30. I tried when you were 40. Every time I suggested you take time, find balance, build a life outside this company, you nodded and then worked harder. You said what you thought I wanted to hear." Julian remembered those conversations differently. He thought his father was testing him, seeing if he'd flinch. "So instead of talking, you destroyed my career." "I stripped away the performance, the facade, the certainty that you knew what you were doing." Victor turned from the window. "I needed you to lose everything that wasn't real so you could figure out what actually mattered." "And Marcus, what was he supposed to do?" "Nothing. I went to him 7 years ago. Told him if you ever showed up at that building, he should do whatever he thought was right. I couldn't control what he chose. I could only create the opportunity." "This is insane. You manipulated my entire life." "I manipulated 6 months of it. The rest was your choices." Victor's voice softened. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking you to understand. But I'm dying, Julian. And before I die, I needed to know I didn't turn you into what I became." The words hit Julian like cold water. "What?" "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. They gave me 6 months." Victor smiled without humor. "Turns out I have excellent timing." Julian sat down. His legs weren't working properly. "When did you find out?" "A year ago. That's when I started planning all of this. The competition, the sabotage, everything." Victor returned to his desk, sat down like an old man, which Julian realized he was. "I've done terrible things, Julian. I've destroyed companies, ruined lives, sacrificed relationships on the altar of success. And for what? So I could die alone in an office, surrounded by money that doesn't mean anything." "You're not dying alone. You have Mom, you have me and Camille." "Do I?" Victor's eyes were sharp. "Your mother has been planning to leave me for 20 years. She just hasn't found the courage yet. Camille tolerates me because she thinks she has to. And you've been so busy trying to earn my approval that you never noticed I've been trying to earn yours." Julian's throat tightened. "What?" "I wanted you to see me as someone worth emulating, as a man who built something meaningful. Instead, you saw exactly what I was, a monster in an expensive suit." Victor's voice broke. "I couldn't live with that, couldn't die with that. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I played a long game. I moved pieces. I tried to manipulate an outcome." "You're not capable of anything else," Julian heard himself say. "Not cruel, just true." "No," Victor agreed. "I'm not. That's the tragedy. I know I'm broken. I just didn't want you to be broken the same way." They sat in silence. Outside the window, the city continued its indifferent dance. "What do you want from me?" Julian asked finally. "Nothing. I've already taken too much." Victor met his eyes. "I just wanted you to know the truth before you decided what to do next. No more games, no more manipulation, just the truth." Julian stood. "I need to think." "Take all the time you need. I'll be here for a few more months anyway." Julian walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "Did you ever love us, me and Camille, or were we just part of the empire?" Victor's face crumpled. For the first time in Julian's life, his father looked vulnerable. "I don't know," Victor said quietly. "I honestly don't know. I think I did. But I also used you, and I don't know if those two things can exist together or if one cancels out the other." Julian nodded. "At least that's honest." He left. Julian walked through the city for hours. Across bridges, through parks, past restaurants where he'd once closed deals. He thought about Marcus, who had lost everything and found a way to keep living. He thought about Camille, competing for something she didn't want. He thought about his mother, trapped in a marriage built on fear. He thought about his father, brilliant and broken, dying alone despite being surrounded by success. And he thought about himself, 52 years old, 30 years at a job that had cost him everything real, a wife who was sleeping in the guest room, a daughter who barely knew him. What had it all been for? He went back to Queens, found Marcus on the roof watching the sunset. "Your father called me," Marcus said. Julian sat down beside him. What did he say? That he was sorry, that he tried to fix something he'd broken and probably just broke it worse. Marcus paused. "He's dying." "I know. How do you feel about that?" Julian thought about it, tried to find the honest answer instead of the right one. Sad, angry, relieved, guilty about being relieved. He shook his head. "I don't know all of it, none of it." Marcus nodded. "That sounds about right." They sat in silence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "Can I ask you something?" Julian said. "When my father came to you 7 years ago, did you forgive him?" "No. Never. I don't think forgiveness works the way people think it does. It's not a switch you flip. It's more like letting go of the weight, not because he deserves it, but because I was tired of carrying it. Have you let go? Marcus smiled. Getting there, helping you, it helped me too. Turned 20 years of anger into something useful. That matters more than forgiveness, I think. Julian absorbed that. I don't know what to do next. About what? Any of it, the company, my father, my marriage, my life. What do you want to do? I want, Julian stopped, tried again. I want to stop performing, stop trying to be who everyone expects me to be. I want to figure out who I actually am underneath all of it. Then do that. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. It's just not easy. Marcus stood. You know what the difference is between you and your father. He knew who he was and didn't like it. You don't know who you are yet. That means you still have a choice. He went inside. Julian stayed on the roof until the stars came out. Julian called Sandra. Can we talk, he asked, in person? They met at a coffee shop near their house. Neutral territory. She looked tired, beautiful but tired. I need to tell you some things, Julian said, and I need you to just listen. Can you do that? She nodded. So he told her everything. The sabotage, Marcus, his father's cancer, the revelation that his entire life had been a performance. He didn't try to make himself look good, didn't try to justify anything. When he finished, Sandra was crying silently. I'm so sorry, he said. For 30 years I made you compete with a ghost, with my father's expectations, with the company, with some imaginary future where everything would be perfect if I could just win hard enough. And you deserved better than that. I did, she agreed. Her voice was thick. I deserved a husband who was present, who chose me, who didn't make me feel like I was always second place to something more important. I know. Do you? Because knowing and changing are different things. I'm changing, or trying to. I don't know if I'm doing it right, but I'm trying. Sandra wiped her eyes. What do you want, Julian, from me, from us? I want to stay married. I want to rebuild what we had, or build something new, since I'm not sure we ever really had something real. But I understand if you don't want that, if you're done, if I've used up all my chances. She was quiet for a long time. I need to know something. Are you doing this because you want to, or because you failed at everything else? Julian thought about it, the honest answer. Both, he said. I failed. That failure showed me what I'd been missing. But that doesn't mean I don't actually want this. I do. I want you. I want Mia. I want a life that isn't about winning. I need time, Sandra said. I need to know that this isn't just another phase, that you're not going to be the perfect husband for 6 months and then go back to who you were. That's fair. And I need you to actually do the work, not just say you will, actually show up, go to therapy, have the hard conversations, choose me even when it's inconvenient. I will, I am. She studied his face for a long moment. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now. That's enough. They finished their coffee in silence. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. That was a start. Julian called his daughter. I'm sorry, he said, for not being present, for making you feel like you had to earn my attention, for spending your whole childhood focused on something that didn't matter instead of someone who did. Mia was quiet on the other end. I don't know if I know how to be a good father, Julian continued. I didn't have a great model, but I want to learn, if you're willing to teach me. Dad, her voice cracked. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be real. I can do real. Real is all I have left. She laughed through tears. Good, real is better. They talked for 2 hours. About her life, her work, her girlfriend, when had she gotten a girlfriend, her hopes. Julian listened. Actually listened, instead of waiting for his turn to talk or planning what to say next. At the end, Mia said, I'm proud of you. I know that's weird because I'm supposed to be proud of you for the business stuff, but I'm proud of you for this, for trying." Julian cried after they hung up, the good kind of crying, the kind that meant something was healing. He went back to his father's office one more time. Victor looked worse, grayer, smaller. The cancer was visible now, eating away at the empire builder from the inside. "I'm not taking the company," Julian said. Victor nodded. "I expected that. And I'm not forgiving you. Not for the sabotage, not for the manipulation, not for the 30 years of making me think love was something you earned instead of something you gave. I know. But I understand it, what you were trying to do, and I think," Julian paused, "I think in your own broken way you did save me, just not the way you wanted to. That's more than I deserve." "Yeah, it is." Julian sat down. "How long do you have?" "Months, maybe weeks, they don't know." "What are you going to do with the time?" "I don't know. Die, I guess. That seems to be the main item on the agenda." Julian surprised himself by laughing. "You're making jokes now." "Apparently dying gives you permission to develop a sense of humor." "Who knew?" Victor smiled. "It looked painful. What about you? What are you going to do?" "Figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be you. Fix my marriage if I can. Be a father to Mia. Actually be one, not just perform the role." "That sounds nice." "It sounds terrifying, but nice." Victor was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Julian, for all of it. For making you think you had to earn love. For treating you like a project instead of a son. For being so broken that the only way I knew how to save you was to break you." "I know. Do you forgive me?" Julian thought about what Marcus had said, about forgiveness being less important than letting go. "Ask me again in a year," he said, "if you're still here. And if I'm not, then I'll work on it for me, not for you." Victor nodded. "That's fair." They sat together in silence, father and son, not fixed, not healed, but honest for maybe the first time. That would have to be enough. 3 months later, Julian was having dinner with Sandra when his mother called. "It's your father," Elena said. "The hospice nurse says it's time, if you want to say goodbye." "I'm coming." Sandra drove. They didn't talk. When they arrived at the Greenwich house, Camille was already there. She looked hollow, exhausted. "He's upstairs," Elena said. "He's been asking for you." Julian climbed the stairs to his father's bedroom. The room smelled like medicine and something else, something final. Victor was in bed. He looked impossibly small without his suits, his office, his empire. "Julian," his voice was a whisper. "I'm here. Did I do it? Did I save you?" Julian sat in the chair beside the bed, took his father's hand. The skin was papery thin. "You did something," Julian said. "I don't know if it was saving, but you broke the cycle. I'm not going to be you, and Camille isn't either, so yeah, you did it." Victor's eyes filled with tears. "Good, that's good. For what it's worth, I think I would have liked you, the version of you before all this, before the money and the empire and the need to win. I would have liked you too, the version of you that's coming, the one I'll never get to meet." Julian's throat tightened. "I'll visit, I'll tell you about him." "You don't have to." "I want to." Victor squeezed his hand, weak, fading. "Tell your mother I'm sorry. Tell Camille." He stopped, started again. "Tell Camille she was always enough. She didn't have to compete, she just had to be." "I will." "And Julian, thank Marcus for me, for seeing something in you worth saving." "I will." Victor closed his eyes. "I'm tired." "Then rest." "Will you stay?" Julian had spent 30 years desperate for his father's approval. Now his father was asking for his presence. "Yeah," Julian said, "I'll stay." Victor died 3 hours later, with Julian and Camille and Elena in the room. His last words were, "I'm sorry." It wasn't enough, but it was something. If this story meant something to you, if any of it felt familiar, share it with someone who needs to hear it. These aren't just stories. They're mirrors, and sometimes seeing yourself clearly is the first step to changing. 6 months after Victor's death, Julian sold his house in Westchester. He and Sandra bought something smaller, cozier, a place that felt like a home instead of a monument. They were in couples therapy twice a week. It was hard. Some days Julian wanted to quit, but he showed up. That was what mattered. Mia visited once a month. They were building something, not the relationship they should have had, but the one they could have now. Better late than never. Camille quit Ashford Capital, sold her stake, moved to Vermont and opened a bookstore. She called it Second Acts. Julian visited her last month. She looked different, lighter. Eleanor finally left the Greenwich house. She bought a condo in the city, started taking art classes. She told Julian she was learning how to want things for herself instead of for other people. The company went to professional management. Neither Julian nor Camille wanted it. Victor had made provisions. If both children refused the CEO position, the firm would be sold or transitioned to the executive team. It was sold, $40 billion, gone. Julian's share was more money than he'd ever need. He put most of it in trust, kept enough to live on, nothing extravagant, just enough. He still lived in Queens, in the building his grandfather had bought in 1961. He'd renovated 3B, made it actually livable. Sandra was spending more nights there, testing things out, seeing if they could build something real. Mia came by often. She liked Queens, said it felt more honest than Westchester ever did. Marcus had moved to Vermont near Camille. Julian visited them both. The three of them, the destroyed entrepreneur, the failed heir, and the liberated daughter, had dinners where they talked about books and ideas and nothing important. It was nice. Julian stood on the roof of the building. Same view he'd stood in front of a year ago. Manhattan still glittering, still indifferent. But he was different. He didn't have an empire, didn't have a title, didn't have certainty about who he was or where he was going. He had Sandra, complicated, fragile, maybe rebuilding Sandra. He had Mia, learning to be a father finally Mia. He had Camille, fellow survivor Camille. He had Marcus, unexpected friend Marcus. And he had himself, 53 years old, starting over, figuring out who he was underneath all the performance. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It was better. Sandra came up to the roof, handed him a beer. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He almost said nothing, almost fell back into the habit of deflection. "I'm thinking about my father," he said instead. "About whether he died knowing he'd fixed what he broke." "Did he?" "I don't know, he broke a lot, but he showed me a door. He couldn't walk through it for me, but he showed me it was there." Sandra leaned against him. He put his arm around her. They stood like that, watching the city. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Giving up the company, the money, all of it?" Julian thought about it, the honest answer. "No, I regret the 30 years I spent chasing it, but walking away, that's the first thing I've done that actually feels like mine." "What now?" "I don't know, figure out what I actually want. Be a husband, be a father, be a person instead of a position." "That's a good start." "Is it enough?" "For me, yeah, it's enough." They stayed on the roof until the stars came out. When they went back downstairs, Julian's phone buzzed. A text from Mia. "Coming by tomorrow with my girlfriend. She wants to meet you. Be cool, okay?" He smiled. "I'll try, no promises." "Good enough." Julian looked at Sandra. "We're meeting the girlfriend tomorrow." "Are you nervous?" "Terrified. What if she doesn't like me?" "Then you'll deal with it. You're good at dealing with things now." "Am I?" You're getting there. They went inside, to their small apartment in Queens, to their complicated, fragile, maybe rebuilding life. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real, Julian was learning, was better than anything he'd ever had before. If you made it this far, if you watched a 52-year-old man learn that success and winning aren't the same as living, subscribe. Because these stories, they're not just entertainment, they're patterns, they're mirrors, they're the things we don't say out loud but need to hear. Comment below, have you ever had to choose between what you thought you wanted and what you actually needed? I read every comment. Share your story. And if someone you know needs to hear this, someone who's still chasing the wrong things, still performing instead of living, share it with them. Sometimes we need to see our own story in someone else's life before we can change.